Alright everyone, it's time for Vermont Issues, episode 82. Some school threats in Vermont have actually made the news, because there's several in a few days' time. One thing you've got to keep in mind, though, that it's a lot like bomb threats when people call them in. Like 99% of the time, there's no actual problem going on. It's someone getting their jollies off or someone who's, a little bit fucked in the head. There was actually one when I was in high school, I think junior year, if I remember correctly. And actually, I believe at the time, the principal ended up resigning, primarily because the response was bungled. You see, they had people, they had at least suspicion that there could be an explosive. And they had everyone stay put. They didn't evacuate the school. Big mistake. They actually got forced out at the time. It was actually mysterious because I'm like thinking to myself, if there actually is something going on here, some of us probably get injured or killed by not evacuating. Not sure exactly why they decided not to, but there are like some people crying and stuff like that. I'm just sitting there bored to tears because we're not allowed to like get up or do anything. I think it was like 20 minutes before they're like, okay, we'll give them the all clear. It's basically bullshit. But sometimes these threats within schools, you've got to take them with a bit of a grain of salt, and they can be exaggerated. Like apparently in one of these stories, one kid asked some other kid for a gun. Now, it's not clear within the context whether they meant at this very moment within a school, which would be a no-no, or whether they were just like trying to buy one. Like you got to realize this is a rural area largely. There are certainly plenty of kids that come from families where they do like hunting and stuff. Maybe their rifle broke. Maybe they're like, oh, can I borrow yours? And somebody overheard it and they thought, oh shit, they're gonna shoot up the school or something. And that can happen too, because sometimes you're hearing it through the grapevine, like a conversation is had, somebody overhears it, it's not 100% accurate. They tell a friend who tells a friend who then decides to tell, like, the resource officer or something, and by the time it gets to them, it's something totally different. I heard years after I left high school that people thought that I was selling drugs, actually, out of because I had one of those big rolling backpacks. Some people thought that I sold drugs out of them or something. And clearly at some point the rumor mill began with this, and I think what happened is one time as a joke we had this senior law teacher, and she was kind of a far out woman. She was pretty funny. She told all sorts of weird stories about like weed farmers in their area and stuff, especially a story how like some happy hippie had planted a bunch of weed in their corn. And so when they were like going to plow through, there were weed plants everywhere, and then the police came and like burned them all and stuff on site, and they were like, oh shit, we're gonna get arrested for this, but they could prove it wasn't theirs, because I think the dude came back and then he got arrested. But one time, there's a plant that grows around here, and the leaves look superficially like marijuana leaves. Now, of course, you don't smoke the leaves, you're smoking the bud, usually, unless you've got problems. So I took some of these leaves, just stuffed them into a bag and put like a smiley face sticker on them and left them on her desk as a joke, because I knew she was going to know right off, well, this isn't actually a drug. But when that happened, my assumption is that some people thought that I was actually like doing drug stuff because I made this joke. And it's not accurate, but apparently some people took it that way. This happens on YouTube too. Somebody says something, it's taken out of context by usually a legacy media outlet, clears throat, and then people actually take it seriously, even though they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And this happens some of the time, especially in schools. Happens in colleges too. Certainly happens in people's workplaces. It's just something that humans do. They gossip and they talk about each other. And if it was accurate, it might be fine, like if it's reported on accurately. But as we see, that's rarely the case. So I'm going to take this with a grain of salt. And another kid was like apparently talking about killing black students, but they can't even prove that the comments were made. Like this particular individual, I guess, saying, no, I didn't say that. It could just be somebody else trying to get them in trouble for not liking them. We've also gotten to that point. That's the other part. Because in schools, rules tend to be fairly stringent, it's possible to say, oh, well, this other kid said something under the sun. And then they say, well, no, I didn't say that. Well, how do you know who's telling the truth? If it's something that's potentially threatening, it has to be taken very seriously because of the sort of bureaucratic legalese going on. What you should be doing is punishing the person who's spreading that rumor because it's clearly malicious and false. Unless somebody overheard it, they have a recording of it, you get some people willing to say, yeah, I witnessed them saying this, then the person shouldn't get in trouble. Sometimes, though, you get suspended for such a thing, which is bullshit. It's always been bullshit. It's like the idea of collective punishment. That they don't really do that in high school generally. But like in elementary school, you know, one kid refuses to clean up their art space or, you know, smears paint on the wall. And they're like, oh, who did this? And none of the kids, of course, are going to come forth and say they did that. And so they all end up getting, you know, they can't go out for recess or whatever. They have to sit there and twiddle their thumbs. I always thought that was so stupid. It's just, it's almost a form of collectivism when you think about it. It's kind of commie in form. I'm being entirely serious there. It's dumb as fuck. But then again, school often is run by people who are dumb as fuck. Honestly, school administrators can be kind of dumb, a little bit dim in the head. The teachers usually are smarter. And like I've always been in schools where the teachers cared and did their job well and things were fine. But then you get some raggedy-ass school where that's not necessarily the case, and the teachers, they're like, yeah, I pick up my paycheck and give these kids some work to do. That's the entire gist of my job. I don't care about anything beyond that. But typically this sort of threat is handled by the students themselves. That is, somebody's going to take somebody else behind the woodshed and give them a thorough pounding. And I think that's probably preferable to the bureaucratic sort of bullshit that goes on in schools. Yeah, honestly speaking, sometimes high schoolers or like college kids can handle things better on their own and probably should because it's formative for them. Being, again, completely honest. I'm not a believer in, like, you know, hit people and stuff. But somebody's trying to spread lies about another person, malicious in form, you know, potentially criminal, and somebody decides to beat their ass. Yeah, well, it saved you a step. Certainly got solved quicker. That happened in my high school with some people. I didn't get involved. I was too quiet for that sort of bullshit. But I saw one kid one time throw up a haymaker and punch some other kid in the face for slapping him. And it was pretty funny because the other kid like starts like wailing and throwing his chair around. It was pretty funny at the time, but he deserved it. I mean, he did this to everybody. He tried to slap me in the face too. So it was a little bit of you know, unofficial punishment, I suppose, for his poor behavior. But he was kind of a messed up kid too, so, you know, I won't think too badly about him. But it was something memorable because it was funny. Because the other kid, like, that he was slapping was like the dedicated goth kid of the school, and he just punches him in the face. It was pretty great to watch that. I'm glad that I was there that day. That's about all. Peace out.